approximately 3 months since this has been come to your department, and then for us to then get a clarification tonight.
Certainly through you, Mr. Mayor. I think we spent a bit of time trying to reflect on the type of discussion that took place back on November 16th, and it was fairly wide-ranging. There were a variety of opinions expressed. And then Christmas popped up, and so there was a fair bit of time when staff complement wasn't around and available to get started on this, as well as other priorities or other activities that staff were working on at that time. And so rather than launch into a process and bring something back that inadvertently misses the mark, we wanted to just double check and make sure that we clearly understood what was expected.
Okay. Thank you. I will ask you just to stay for one more question. In some of the correspondence we've received from Mr. Poggi, he made some assertions or allegations, however you'd like to describe it, that he is not getting responses that he considers to be thorough. If you don't mind, I'd like to give you the opportunity. Do you feel you have responded in a sufficient and appropriate manner? And I know that our chief of the fire department is not here to answer that question, but from your perspective, oh, actually it doesn't even say Parks and Recreation. My apologies, it says Engineering and Fire Departments. So I'm going to say, sorry, Mr. Anderson, I'm not going to ask you that question because it doesn't ask you. It's asking for the Engineering and Fire. Although, while you're there, do you wish to respond? Well, come on, let's be realistic, right? There's no point in calling back. So I would like to ask the Director of Parks and the Director of Engineering, is their opinion? Yes. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I just think it's more probably pragmatic rather than just have you sit down. So
Go ahead,
can you
Councilor, ask your
comment
question.
on those two allegations regarding that you are not responding in a sufficient and appropriate manner?
You want to go ahead?
Sorry, through the Mayor and Council Plant. Yes, we received a number of correspondence from Mr. Poggi regarding concerns around Glendenning. We do feel like we have responded to his correspondence satisfactorily. But if he chooses and he wishes to still meet with staff, we're open to meet with him to talk about it in more detail. But to further respond on correspondence we've already reiterated, I don't think would be fruitful.
I'm fine with you. Okay, so those are the extent of my questions. So the only thing that I'm going to suggest, having not spoken in favor or against a motion, is actually a further amendment, which is why I started off by asking, should we be looking at the entire package? I'm uncomfortable with taking another 8 to 9 months to study this. And I appreciate that the sentiment is that we should do it during the summer, but I'd like to make an amendment that the study time frame be approximately 2 to 5 months. And if there's a seconder, I'll speak to that.
I'm seconding.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Point of order, right?
Point of order.
Thank you.
I made a motion that we have on the floor that was seconded for amendment. Shouldn't we deal with that amendment before we entertain another amendment?
So I think I've given direction to Councilor Plant that unless I've missed a step here, is that what you put forward, there was no motion that was put forward on the floor. What I heard was an introduction, and then you added to the recommendation. That's what was put on the floor. So
Actually, no, I moved and Councilor Haynes seconded. If the feeling is of staff that what I moved will be automatically included in the votes, that's fine. But I did move it and it was seconded.
I think I'll go to the clerk for clarification. What I heard, I'll stand corrected, is it just came to the floor as one piece.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was taking your lead on that as well, that it would be one in integrity with that additional piece added on.
That's fine. That's what people wish to interpret.
So we've got the motion introduced. So
Is the mover willing to withdraw the seconding for what I put forward? Or is the seconder rather?
I don't think I need to.
No, okay.
there isn't one. Okay. So we put a motion forward. It was modified from what the report was, which council has the ability to do. We have an amendment that's been moved and seconded, and now we're going to hear some discussion on the amendment. First up.
Thank you. That, again, just for clarification, that's why I inquired whether or not there was an amendment on the floor, so I'm happy to continue. I am asking council to consider 2 to 5 months I don't think there's any value on doing the data collection, particularly over the summer, if we've already shut down access to that site. Had there been access available to that site throughout the summer, then we could do an accurate methodology of how much use of that site is required to measure. It's already been shut down. So in my opinion, adding this we've waited 3 months, we waited a couple of months, if I recall, because we didn't want to deal with it at the initial delegation component. Adding another 8 to 9 months is a year. I think for some people who have expressed even tonight physical challenges about using the park, why are we waiting so long if it's purely for the summer? If it's a capacity issue that we can't do this report in 2 to 5 months, then I would be swayed to going back to 8 to 9. But let's get on with this is my attitude, and if it can be done, let's do that, please.
Okay, Councillor, so I think if I'm interpreting your earlier question to staff around removing the parking signs, we have an issue here where the signs have been put up, parking behavior has changed. It's somewhat not changed, because we keep hearing and I keep seeing that people are parking in no parking spots. So were you suggesting earlier that the signs be taken away so that the access to the park that's been going on for many, many years be actually documented and studied before changes are implemented? Is that what you're suggesting?
I was looking to see if there had been a precedent that then we could act on again to do it, but seeing as there was no precedent, I would not suggest that we take them down now, because I think we may look silly if we end up putting them back. So I'm not looking to take them down in the interim, especially if it's 2 to 5 months. If it's 8 to 9 months, maybe I would be swayed. I hadn't thought of that context.
Okay. I think before I take a question, I think I'm going to get some clarification from staff on the timeline.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As we've looked at what we feel the scope of work is in order to bring back a proper report, and recognizing that while Glendenning was the impetus for this report, it is a much broader scope now than simply one specific area. And in order to make, I think, proper recommendations, come up with viable options in terms of access to the entire park, we want to make sure that we have, reliable data for that whole area. And given that summer is going to be the peak traffic season when we get the majority of the people attending the park in all different modes, we wanted to be sure that we captured that as part of the process. And so to compress that, I think, challenges the reliability of some of the options that may come back. In addition to the data, we're proposing spending a fair bit of time trying to connect with the community on a broader sense and get their understanding of what's going to be important and what's going to be useful and meaningful to them. So I agree, it's frustrating at times looking at the length of time that it takes. Councillor Plant, I appreciate your comment about capacity, because I think that is one of the factors if we were trying to compress that and continue with the other work that's assigned.
Thank you for that. Councillor Haynes, go ahead.
The reason I seconded the motion from Councillor Plant was exactly to have this conversation, given the interest in the audience on this topic. And I think it's good for us all to understand why 8 to 9 months may be needed to do the job as effectively as we want it to be done. That said, I did have another comment. As we go to one of the bullet points where it says community engagement at the involved level with any key stakeholders such as local community associations, Friends of Mount Douglas Park and the Parks, Trails and Recreation, Environmental Metro Areas Committee, etc. In terms of community engagement, I don't see any statement there around particular tools, but I do recall that in the notes of discussion when it first came to council, there was the suggestion maybe open house, maybe town hall, and that type of process. The scheduling and timing of those takes time, and I wonder if staff would talk to that. Did you envision that type of public engagement? Or was it going to be more small working group engagement? Can you just talk us through that so we've got a sense of what is the approach you're taking, please?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Haynes, I think we'd be looking at a variety of options, some smaller targeted, some broader based. I think in terms of trying to capture input from park users, it's going to be difficult to do that on a smaller basis, and so while we could set up at a couple of different access points, it would likely be that we do some broader public opportunities to gather that type of input.
So having heard that, I think the 8 to 9 months is a reasonable time, and if that's what the staff is suggesting. Thank you.
I think you seconded it.
I did, for the point of discussion.
Okay. All right, so 2 more hands up. I'll take Councilor Price and Councilor Brennan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I speak against the proposed amendment. I think it sort of, particularly with having the 2 involved in the thing, the 5 might have even been saleable. The proposal of a 2 to 5 month turnaround speaks to the way things might have been done in another time. In this report, where it talks about an advisory planning, an advisory working group composed of representatives of all those groups will assist staff in planning and in the public consultation process. So there's like phases to this thing. There's the stakeholder groups, there's a group of the stakeholder groups that are going to talk about the public process, then there's going to be the public process, then it has to go to 2 advisory committees that are advisory committees of this council, which, as we know, by the time you get a report, by the time you schedule it, the next committee meeting, the months rack on. So, I mean, at the very most that I would want to do is just have in the minutes show that, staff indicate, council indicated to staff that, if there was any way of processing this in any shorter fashion, to by all means do so, but to restrict it to 2 to 5 months, I think, doesn't match up with what the text of this recommendation is all about.
Councilor Dermott?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also will not support the motion in front of us. A couple of things. One, Councilor Bryce just pointed out that ultimately this is going to involve advisory committees. Most advisory committees don't meet during the months of July and August, so that would make it particularly difficult to get their involvement. But beyond that, I think, as been pointed out already, this is not now just about Glendenning Road, what happens there. This is a study of all the accesses to the park, an attempt to come up with a plan that works, hopefully, for all of our citizens to the highest degree possible, while still minimizing impact on the natural area of the park and, as suggested, minimizing impact on the experience you get in the accesses to the park. So I think it's important to do a thorough and proper job of that and make sure you get it right first time around. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too am not going to support the motion. There's a lot of work to do this, and I think the report states some of it. And it's not just about access at Glendenning. We as a council decided it would be a broader, all accesses to the park and how we can look at them for all modes. So it's going to take a lot longer, and as others have said, you've got summer coming up. And if anything I've heard this last year on council is to be open and transparent in public process. So it has to be at least 8 or 9 months. We can give direction to staff. If there's any way to shorten the time, yes, but don't shorten the time on any part of the public participation. Thank you.
Councilor Sanders?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I won't be supporting the motion either. I believe that the staff has said they need this amount of time, and certainly this is much larger than one access. And, staff has already had a lot on its plate that we've already decided through the strategic planning process, and this is in addition to. And I feel it's better to do a very thorough job, but it turns out to be effective and addresses all the issues. So, and I do believe that it's important to include those summer park users. It's far different than, this finished, started, finished in April or July. You miss that whole group of people that are necessarily using the parks. So I support what's before us.
Thank you. Any more discussion? Just chime in a little bit myself. It's trying to read the public as best as I can. I think it's a little bit frustrating that it's going to take this long, given that we're already 3 months into this process. By the time this is done, it's going to be at least a year. Probably it's going to be a year from that first meeting. Kind of a year in limbo, trying to figure out how to deal with this state of affairs that's satisfying to maybe half the community and unsatisfying to the other half. I haven't heard anything from staff that give me a sense that we can speed this up. I'm still frustrated by it. Are there any other options for us? Can we divide the work? We started on Glendenning. It's been expanded in scope to include all of the part from the earlier motion. I don't know what can be done other than to split it that way. Is there any interest from members of council on trying to get more of an answer on the particular road that's in question that started this process, or do we need to wait for the full study? I'm just going to throw that out as a question. I'm not trying to lead on that. Microphone?
Sorry.
Councilor Haynes.
Mr. Mayor, if I can speak to that, I think the full study is needed because it's so interconnected. So if we, adjust the parking in one area, it's going to shift the other, and it will take longer. I think we all share some of the frustration over time, but we want to bring forward something that fully engages the public in this process and comes up with the best possible answers. I don't think it can be rushed.
Councilor Brown, we're still on the amendment,
Mr. Mayor, I think that it has to be the full study. Just speaking from experience with traffic calming projects, we would never do a traffic calming on one block. We would take a radius around so that all parts of the neighborhood were included. So I think the access points to Mount Doug, it all has to be included, not just Glendenning. Thank you.
Any more discussion? I call a question on the amendment to change the scope of work to be done within 2 to 5 months. I'll call a question on that. All in favor? The amendment speaking in favor of that as well. Against? That's everyone else against, and that motion, that amendment is defeated. Councilor Plant, myself, are in opposition. So we're now back to the main motion, as originally amended as it was put forth, and I'll give Councilor Bryce the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this is a good piece of work. I know it's frustrating that it's taking so long, but I think that when we reflect on the item coming later in our agenda, which if we support it, would see the Mount Doug Park management plan taking place in 1819, this will form a very important part of that. So this is not just kind of a one-off. I think this is going to be something which needs to be good enough to be able to form part of that management plan, which will have some enduring use for the community. So it's worthwhile really looking at all aspects of it.
Thank you. Councilor Dermott and then Councilor Murdoch.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm simply going to segue on what Councilor Price said, because she really said basically what I wish to outline. When I took a look through tonight's agenda and realized that we were not that far away from the master planning process for Mount Doug Park, my immediate thought was exactly the same thing as Councilor Price, that this in fact will provide a very valuable piece of information for that master park planning process. So I think it's really quite defensible and in fact desirable in that respect.
Thank you. Councilor Murdoch.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am obviously going to support this going forward. I appreciate the work that staff has done to prepare the methodology and seek council's clarification on the scope this evening. I look forward to this moving quickly, but ensuring that we accurately capture the sentiment of park users and residents in Saanich, and those really all over the region and likely all over British Columbia that come to enjoy Mount Doug Park, especially in the summer months. So, I mean, in one respect, it's a symptom of what is really a nice problem to have, and that's that we're home to this beautiful park that attracts users from all over the region. It's certainly evident at most of the access points to this park that it is very popular, especially on the weekends. If you get a clear day, you don't get a clear parking area. There are a lot of people that want to get up Mount Doug, and for good reason. So I'm pleased to see this moving forward. I'm particularly pleased to see the discussion this evening put emphasis on all modes and access to the park, because obviously not everyone's going to arrive by car, nor should everybody want to arrive by car, and I think ensuring that we're providing access for all forms of, all modes of travel to get to Mount Doug Park and for all users to access Mount Doug Park is certainly, I think, to everyone's benefit. So pleased to see that emphasis put on this evening's guidance from council, and I will be supporting this.
Councillor Haynes.
I would like to support this as well. And we did hear some comment from the audience that some groups might not participate given certain conditions, and I would hope that all groups participate in this study to the best of their ability. Thank you.
Any more discussion? Councillor Plant.
Thank you. Now that we're just on the main motion, just a question, two questions for staff on the report and in specific the methodology to you, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Ms. Director Henderson. I just want to be clear, when the statement is made, options that minimize impacts to the natural character of the park are preferred, would that prevent an option coming forward that would see potentially additional parking inside the park? And for the clarity of my colleagues, we went out and visited the site and we did discuss that the potential of adding a little bit of space into the park, while I know would be controversial, is something that would come up in the report. Is that something that would still be made available? Or does this comment, options that minimize impacts to the natural character of the park are preferred, meaning they wouldn't even come forward?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Plant, I think the wording in the methodology flows from the wording from Council's motion from November 16th, where it spoke about not changing the ambience of the park, and certainly what we're hearing tonight is, and its accesses. I don't think anything is precluded as we go into it. I think we're trying to go in with as open as mind as possible, but we understand that there's some parameters that Council's interested in us trying to work within. I think if we got together and met with groups and there seemed to be a consensus that some additional parking in some locations was palatable, then that's an option that we would bring forward.
Great. Second question, just that $10,000 for the traffic study, in your mind, does that do all of the access points, and is that an adequate figure to do such?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yeah, that's the fee that we're expecting to cover the entire park.
So that's not just Glendenning, which is important.
Correct.
Okay. So then I will again speak in favor of this. I will reiterate the comment about 8 to 9 months plus the 3 months for a report on access to Mount Doug Park. I am concerned as a councillor in Saanich that it will take a year for us to go from moving a motion to getting a report. And I appreciate that if that's a capacity issue, then we around this table have to deal with that capacity issue. Because a year for a report on parking options, to me, if someone were to come to me and say, are you serious, it's going to take a year? I would say, yes, I am serious, and I agree that's too long. Thank you. So I will speak in favor with those comments.
Great, thank you. I think we always have issues with capacities, new issues come to council, and we have to slot them into the year when we were planning for them. But capacity and timeline also tie in with priority as well. When you set a timeline on it, you essentially set a priority on it. We don't set priorities for our administration, but if we were to say it needs to be done within 3 months, that would essentially prioritize it. I actually have a question here, and it's based on something I read on the second page, and I'll direct this to our Director of Parks. So on the second page it says, community engagement at the involved level with key stakeholders, such as local community associations, Friends of Mount Doug, as park and parks, trails, and recreation and environment and natural areas advisory committees. I'm very happy to see some IAP2 nomenclature appear in these reports. It also says an advisory working group comprised of representatives from these groups would assist staff with planning and implementing the public consultation process. So we're going to have an advisory group for helping design the process. They'll, I assume, will work with the consultant. And then we're going to engage with the stakeholders. I'm wondering if on the IP2 scale we need to ramp this up a little bit to the collaborate stage and to actually involve people with the solution. We've got a very large group of park users here that are very passionate. And I'm wondering if this is going to be enough. And if we're going to, and hopefully we come back after 9 months and we find a solution that satisfies the majority of people. But I'm wondering how we can ensure that happens after such a long period.
I think, Mr. Mayor, that regardless of whether it's been a Parks and Recreation initiative or through one of the other departments, the experience so far with the IAP2 process has been that we'll indicate that we would work within a certain category, but that tends to ebb and flow back and forth. And I think that our intent was certainly that input from stakeholders and users, community groups, etc., that input would influence the kinds of recommendations and the potential solutions that we're bringing back. So I'm confident that what's laid out is going to capture as much input as we can gather, and we'll try and bring that back in a fashion that makes sense in terms of options moving forward.
Thank you. I think council would like to see some sort of update along the way. What would you recommend as a check-in point for us after the, I'll suggest where the public consultation process has been essentially designed by the advisory committee?
Yeah, I would think we would probably be looking at late April, beginning of May in terms of an opportunity to come back and just update what's going on.
Okay, that would be good. Okay, with that, I'll look at my support. I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. All right, with that, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. We'll start with reports from members of council. Madam Clerk, would you like to introduce the first item, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This next item is a report from Councillor Brownlow recommending that council endorse a resolution as outlined in the report for consideration at the 2016 convention of the Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities. The report actually is asking for council's endorsement on a two-phase recommendation. The first part is that there be the support for the establishment of an abandoned and derelict vessel program, and the second component is the end-of-life vessel program.
Hand up, sorry. Maybe the report writer. I can point to first. Go ahead, Councilor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move the motion recommendation, if someone seconds it. Thank you. So I just want to say, Council, off the front, as I've said to a lot of people in the last couple of weeks, this issue isn't my issue. This issue has been around Canada for many, many years, and many of our colleagues, especially in the smaller communities, are really being impacted. They don't have the financial resources. They don't have the staff resources. Saanich has had that this year, but we've spent a significant amount of money and significant staff time. And it's not part of our duties, you know, it's not what the charter says we're responsible for. Higher levels of government, the province and the feds, both get various funds from boat owners. I had a call today from a tugboat owner, retired now, over 50 years in the business, and he enlightened me on some more financial fees that vessels have to pay. For instance, commercial vessels pay a NAV Canada fee for all those lights in the water, you know, nautical lights to warn of dangers. They have to pay a fee, whereas pleasure boats, like yachts, don't. And then the other part he told me was commercial vehicles, especially those that carry passengers. They have to get a license every 5 years and for inspection, whereas pleasure boats don't. And what he recommended was that he said to me, he likes the Washington State idea, and there's many, Oregon and whatnot. He said, make it simple, flat fee, try and you know, establish a fund. And I said to him, for me, it's not us trying to establish it. It's finally saying to our colleagues in the provincial and federal government, let's stop pointing fingers. We all know we have to address these things. They are causing environmental damage. I've also had an email from Department of Transportation certified captain, retired, and he tells me that what happens with these older boats is they're given away, or you know, a couple of bucks are passed, and then people assume that they can fix them, but they can't afford the mortgage. So then they go more out in dangerous areas. Cadborough Bay is an area where people want to moor for some reason, because it's free. but then I talked to the tugboat fellow who rescued someone off there. The bottom of Cabra Bay cannot hold an anchor, and it gets significant winds. So some of these boats that are near end of life end up getting picked up by others who think they can fix them, and then they find out how expensive it is, and then they can't afford the mortgage. So I think that there's a lot of really important issues to address in this. I was encouraged that Gene Crowder's private members bill that happened last time is now resurrected. They've done some wording changes. The NDP, it's C-219 now. What they're hoping to do is actually have the Coast Guard become the receiver of wrecks. In the old days, I don't know how many years ago, this captain told me that boats like this in Victoria Harbour were seized by David Featherby. I remember David. He was the harbour master at the time, and they were taken to Auckland Point and disposed of somehow. But that no longer happens. And I think one of the speakers said it, the Coast Guard has no money. So even with the new C-219 bill coming back, unless they're going to give the Coast Guard money to be the receiver of wrecks and how they're going to manage it, it's going to be difficult. And I think I saw in the newspaper online today that, I think it was the provincial government, saying that they've streamlined the process. Well, that's great. Take ownership. It's your issue, not ours. And so I think for my motion, as the clerk has said, it's actually twofold. I made some suggestions of how you may find fees, but in Washington it's a flat fee and it is a sticker. And so what that could mean is that if you were a boat owner, you'd have to pay for this sticker annually. And when boats are out and about, if they get stopped by, Coast Guard or others, they didn't have the sticker on, there might be a fine or something. But something has to give. We just can't afford it. Who knows what the windstorms will be like next winter?